The room was already buzzing when Professor Linda Martinez walked in. Students whispered, some scrolling through their phones, others adjusting their cameras, ready to record. Everyone knew today's lecture wasn't just another math class, it was a takedown. Professor Martinez was famous for exposing myths, and today, she had a target bigger than any before. Elon Musk. She placed her coffee on the desk, pushed up her glasses, and turned to face the packed hall. "Tell me," she began, her voice carrying easily through the room, "what makes someone a genius?" A few students exchanged glances, unsure if this was rhetorical. "Is it wealth?" she continued, pacing. "Is it fame? Or is it actual, provable intelligence?" With a single click, the massive screen behind her lit up. A familiar face filled the space, Elon Musk, standing in front of a SpaceX rocket. Some students chuckled. Others sat up straighter. "A man celebrated as a visionary," Martinez said, her tone sharp. "A man who claims to be at the forefront of science, engineering, and space travel. But is he really the mind behind it all? Or is he just the face of the work done by actual geniuses?" The murmurs grew louder. "This," she said, clicking again, revealing a complex rocket trajectory equation on the board, "is what real rocket science looks like. And today, we'll prove whether or not Elon Musk could actually solve it." A few students laughed. Others whispered. Nobody expected Musk to show up. But in the back of the room, a man in a baseball cap and worn hoodie sat quietly, watching. And when Martinez finally asked, "Who wants to try?" a single hand went up. The students turned. The room stilled. And without knowing it, Professor Martinez had just made the biggest mistake of her career. The chalk squeaked as the man in the baseball cap began writing. At first, no one reacted. Students assumed he would hesitate, stumble, or get stuck within seconds. But that didn't happen. Instead, his marker moved quickly, filling the board with structured calculations. No pauses, no second guesses. Each symbol, each number, flowed effortlessly. The murmurs in the room faded. Someone shifted in their seat. A girl in the front row frowned, trying to follow the steps. Professor Martinez's smirk vanished. She had expected hesitation. She had prepared to watch him struggle, to reinforce her point. Instead, he was working like someone who had done this before, many times before. She crossed her arms. "You seem confident," she said, keeping her voice neutral. The man didn't even glance at her. "It's a standard trajectory problem," he said casually, as if solving it were no different than tying his shoes. Some students exchanged glances. Standard? The equation on the board looked like something pulled from an advanced aerospace textbook. A boy wearing thick glasses leaned forward. "Wait, is he actually solving it?" The SpaceX hoodie student whispered, "It looks right." The professor's fingers tightened slightly on the marker in her hand. She stepped closer, eyes scanning the numbers as he continued. No errors. He wasn't just working through the problem. He was doing it fast. Too fast. The room remained eerily quiet. No one wanted to break the tension. Every eye was fixed on the board, watching an unknown man do what the entire class had silently deemed impossible. Minutes passed. Then, he reached the final step. With a final stroke, he underlined the solution. "There," he said, stepping back. "That works." Dead silence. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with confusion and something close to disbelief. Martinez stared at the board, then back at him. "How did you?" She stopped herself, exhaling sharply. The math was perfect. Before she could say anything else, the man casually lifted the marker again. "But," he continued, "this could be optimized." Without waiting for permission, he wrote a second equation beneath the first. The students leaned in, some holding their breath. "This modification," he said, tapping the board, "adjusts the burn rate at different altitudes. Saves fuel during transition phases." He stepped back, marker in hand. Martinez's throat felt dry. She was staring at a correction. No, an improvement, to an equation she had designed to be unsolvable for the average person. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, A sharp intake of breath came from the front row. A student quickly tapped his phone, eyes widening as he compared something on the screen. "Oh my God," he whispered. Another voice echoed him. "Oh my God." The realization spread like wildfire. A girl near the aisle clapped a hand over her mouth. A boy in the second row muttered, "No way." The SpaceX hoodie student was already standing. His phone screen glowed, showing an image. His voice trembled with excitement. "That's Elon Musk." The wave of shock hit the room instantly. Gasps, scraping chairs, phones being lifted in a frenzy. The sudden, chaotic hum of voices filled the space. The man, no, Elon Musk, sighed slightly, as if realizing the moment he had hoped to avoid had finally arrived. Professor Martinez still hadn't moved. The billionaire in front of her, whom she had just spent the last 20 minutes calling lucky, privileged, and incapable of understanding deep mathematics, had just corrected her equation in front of her entire class. Her fingers curled into her palm. Everything had just gone completely off script. The classroom erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as students jumped up. Phones flashed as they recorded the moment, capturing every detail. The murmurs turned into full-blown exclamations. "Is this really happening? That's actually him. He solved it faster than our professor." Elon Musk stood in front of the whiteboard, hands tucked casually into his pockets, as if nothing unusual had happened. He glanced around, looking slightly amused but also a little uncomfortable with all the attention. Professor Martinez still hadn't moved. Her eyes flickered between Musk and the equations he had written. Her carefully planned lecture, her argument, her entire premise, everything had just been shattered in front of her students. She forced herself to straighten her posture. Clearing her throat, she raised a hand. "All right, everyone, settle down." No one listened. The SpaceX hoodie student was already halfway out of his seat, his voice loud with disbelief. "But, Professor, didn't you just say he couldn't do this math?" A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to her. The words stuck in her throat. She couldn't deny what they had just witnessed. Musk hadn't just solved the problem, he had improved it. For a professor who prided herself on logic and evidence, there was only one painful truth: she had been wrong. Musk, sensing the tension, finally spoke. "I didn't mean to interrupt your lesson." His voice was calm, measured. "I was just curious about what was being said." Martinez regained some composure. She gestured toward the board. "You clearly understand advanced mathematics," she admitted. "But that doesn't change my point." Musk tilted his head. "And what point is that?" She folded her arms. "That intelligence alone doesn't determine success. That people like you, wealthy tech figures, benefit from privilege more than ability." The room went still again. Some students leaned in, eager to hear his response. Others watched Martinez, waiting to see how she would push forward. Musk thought for a moment. "Privilege helps," he admitted. "I won't argue that. But without skill, knowledge, and the willingness to work insane hours, it doesn't mean much." Martinez narrowed her eyes. "So you don't think having resources gives you an unfair advantage?" "An advantage? Yes. But unfair?" Musk shrugged. "The world has never been fair. The question is, what do you do with what you're given?" A student in the back spoke up. "But Professor, didn't he just prove that he actually does know the technical side of his companies?" Another joined in. "Yeah, I mean, he just solved something none of us could." Martinez pursed her lips. "One equation doesn't define intelligence," she countered. "And understanding one problem doesn't mean you designed an entire space program." Musk chuckled softly. "That's fair." He glanced at the board. "But you know, if you have another problem, I'd be happy to try." Martinez froze for a second. This was her moment to regain control. If Musk wanted another challenge, she'd give him one. She turned back to the board and erased the rocket equation. Picking up the marker, she wrote something new, something far more difficult. The symbols stretched across the board, weaving into a complex set of integrals and differential equations. She stepped back. This isn't about rockets. It's about climate science. Musk studied the problem. This equation, Martinez continued, models atmospheric carbon capture efficiency. It's a cutting-edge mathematical challenge, something even top environmental researchers struggle with. So tell me, Mr. Musk, do you really know everything, or was that last problem just a lucky guess? The room held its breath. Musk examined the board. He didn't react immediately. This problem was different, more abstract, less about physics and more about chaotic environmental systems. The students watched closely. For the first time, they saw something unusual. Musk wasn't writing. Martinez felt a flicker of satisfaction. This time, his stuck. But then, Musk did something unexpected. He took a step closer. And he smiled. This is an interesting approach, he said, tapping part of the equation. You're using turbulence models to track gas diffusion in the atmosphere, right? Martinez hesitated. Yes. Musk nodded. Your method is good, but it's missing something. Before she could respond, he lifted the marker and adjusted part of the equation. The change was subtle, an extra term, a shift in the logic. Martinez's breath caught. It was the exact adjustment she had been struggling with for months. How had he seen it so quickly? Musk finished writing and turned back to her. This correction should make your model more accurate for real-world conditions. Unless, of course, I'm mistaken. The entire class sat in stunned silence. Martinez knew the truth. He wasn't mistaken. And just like that, the narrative had shifted once again. Musk hadn't just defended his intelligence. He had demonstrated it in a way no one in that room could deny. Even her. The classroom remained silent. Professor Martinez's fingers twitched slightly as she studied the board. She had no choice but to acknowledge it. Elon Musk had just done something extraordinary. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't stumbled. Instead, he had identified the exact flaw in her equation that even she had been struggling with. This wasn't just someone with a passing interest in math. This was someone who lived in the numbers, who saw patterns before others even recognized they existed. But before she could say anything, a student near the back spoke up. Professor, does this mean you were wrong? The question cut through the room. A few students turned toward Martinez, waiting for her response. Others still had their phones up, recording, knowing this was a moment no one would believe without proof. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to stay composed. Science isn't about being right all the time, she said carefully. It's about adjusting when new information challenges our assumptions. Musk smirked slightly. That's a good answer. Martinez shot him a look. Don't get comfortable. This doesn't mean you're right about everything. Musk shrugged. Never said I was. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't a battle anymore, at least not in the way it had started. And yet, something still felt off. Martinez folded her arms. I have one question for you, Mr. Musk. He raised an eyebrow. Only one. How did you know? She gestured to the board. Not just the first equation, but this one. How did you see the missing piece so quickly? Musk hesitated for a fraction of a second. A small pause, barely noticeable. But Martinez caught it. I read a lot, he said finally. And when you work on these problems long enough, you start recognizing patterns. It was a smooth answer, but it didn't sit right. Martinez wasn't the only one who noticed. The SpaceX hoodie student frowned slightly. That doesn't explain everything, he muttered. And then, as if the universe itself had been waiting for the perfect moment, a phone buzzed loudly in the silence. One of the students, a girl with a notebook in her lap, glanced down at her screen. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, she whispered. Another buzz. More students looked. Within seconds, murmurs spread. Some gasped. Others turned their phones so their friends could see. What is it? Martinez demanded. The girl looked up, hesitating. Then she turned her phone around so the professor could see the screen. A news headline blazed across it. Elon Musk's secret campus visit. Planned weeks in advance? Below the headline was a blurry image. An image of Musk, standing outside the university, earlier that morning, talking to someone. Martinez's stomach dropped. The students erupted. Wait, he planned this. I thought this was just a coincidence. Who's that guy he's talking to? Musk's jaw tightened slightly. That's interesting. Martinez snatched the phone, scanning the article. It wasn't from a major news site yet, but the details were specific. Too specific. The article claimed that Musk had been seen entering the university long before the class started. That he had met privately with someone in the administration. That his surprise appearance wasn't so spontaneous after all. She turned back to him. Do you want to explain this? Musk exhaled. I told you. I saw the tweets this morning and decided to come. Then who were you meeting? He hesitated again. Longer this time. That was all the confirmation she needed. Martinez's mind raced. None of this made sense. Musk showing up, solving an impossible equation, correcting her climate model. And now, reports that he had been seen on campus long before class began? He wasn't here just for a debate. He was here for something else. The room had turned. The excitement was still there, but now it was mixed with suspicion. Martinez took a step closer. What aren't you telling us? Musk glanced toward the clock. I think we're out of time for class. Nice try. She folded her arms. But I'm not letting you dodge the question. Before he could answer, the door to the lecture hall creaked open. A woman in a dark suit stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room before landing on Musk. She walked briskly toward him and leaned in, whispering something too quiet for the students to hear. Musk's entire demeanor shifted. His casual confidence hardened into something else. Something more serious. He gave the woman a small nod, then turned back to Martinez. I have to go. Martinez stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Not yet. The students were completely locked in now. She lowered her voice. What's really going on? Musk hesitated. His gaze flickered over the students, the phone still recording, the curious eyes waiting for his response. Then, just as quickly, he shook his head. Not here. Martinez studied him. His expression had changed. This wasn't just some PR stunt, and it wasn't just about proving a point. Something bigger was at play. And for the first time since the lecture had started, she felt a flicker of uncertainty. Musk stepped past her, walking toward the door. The woman in the suit followed closely behind. Before he left, he turned back. His eyes met hers, and for a split second, she saw something behind them. Something he wasn't saying. Then he was gone, and the classroom was left buzzing with unanswered questions. The lecture hall had emptied, but Professor Martinez stood frozen at her desk, staring at the news article still glowing on the student's phone. Elon Musk's visit had been planned? That didn't sit right. Something bigger was going on. She grabbed her own phone and scrolled quickly, searching for any more updates. The article had spread fast, already being shared by multiple outlets. The claims weren't concrete, just speculation, but they were enough to raise questions. She needed answers. And she needed them now. Hours later, Martinez sat in her office, tapping her fingers on her desk. The campus had been buzzing all afternoon. Students, professors, even the university board had questions. But the real question was, why had Musk been here? And what was he hiding? A sharp knock on her door made her jump. She turned, expecting a student, maybe even a reporter. Instead, it was Musk. Alone. No security. No assistant. Just him. She narrowed her eyes. You've got a lot of explaining to do. He sighed and stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. I figured you'd say that. Martinez folded her arms. You were seen on campus before the lecture. Who were you meeting? Musk leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Someone from your administration. Her breath hitched. My administration. He nodded. I was tipped off. Tipped off to what? Musk hesitated, then spoke carefully. To the fact that your research has been leaking. A cold chill ran through her. She shook her head. That's impossible. My work isn't classified, but it's not public either. Who would even want it? Musk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. After a moment, he turned it around and held it up for her to see. It was a document, a scientific paper, and it had her equations. Only, it wasn't from her. Martinez's heart pounded. She reached for the phone, eyes scanning the content. The paper was written in Russian. The equations had been adjusted slightly, but they were still hers. This is from me. Musk nodded. I know. She met his eyes, fear creeping into her voice. Where did you get this? He exhaled. From an intelligence contact. This paper was published months ago. And it's not just about carbon capture, Martinez. He took the phone back and scrolled down to highlight a section. Her stomach turned. The equations were being used to model gas dispersion in enclosed spaces. Martinez felt sick. This isn't environmental science. This is military application. Musk finished her sentence. Weaponization. Someone had taken her work, her research on improving carbon capture efficiency, and adapted it for something far more sinister. And worse, someone at her own university had leaked it. Martinez sat down, her mind spinning. Who could have done this? She murmured. Musk had already considered that. Someone with access to your unpublished work. Someone inside the university. Martinez's hands clenched into fists. I want to find them. Musk nodded. Good, because I already have a plan. He pulled a notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. Inside was a detailed diagram, a network of names, connections, and suspicious activity. She recognized many of the names. Professors, research assistants, faculty members with access to sensitive data. How do we catch them? She asked. Musk smirked. We set a trap. For the next 24 hours, Martinez and Musk worked in secret. They created 3 different versions of a new research paper. Each version contained subtle errors, things only they would recognize. The kind of mistakes that would make the equations seem valid, until tested in real-world conditions. Then, they strategically shared these versions with different people. One version went to a senior administrator. Another version was given to a trusted professor. The third version was sent to Professor Hammond, a respected faculty member who had always seemed overly interested in her work. Now, all they had to do was wait. Whoever leaked the document would unknowingly reveal themselves. And when that happened, they'd know exactly who the spy was. The spy is exposed. It didn't take long. Less than 48 hours later, an exact copy of the paper was published, but it contained the flaw from the version given to Hammond. That was all the proof they needed. Martinez stormed into the faculty lounge, her heartbeat like a drum in her ears. Hammond sat at a corner table, sipping coffee and flipping through his notes like nothing was wrong. She didn't hesitate. You sold my work. Hammond barely looked up. Excuse me. Martinez slammed a folder onto the table. This paper, the one you leaked, it has the same error I planted in your copy. A flicker of something passed across his face. Not shock, recognition. But then, just as quickly, he recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Musk, who had been standing just behind Martinez, spoke next. I think you do. Hammond's jaw tightened. Martinez pressed forward. You leaked my research. And not just now. You've been doing it for months. Years, even. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a slow sigh, he set down his coffee. You have no proof. Musk stepped forward, tapping his phone screen. Actually, we do. A few seconds later, the door opened, and in walked 2 university security officers, followed by a man in a dark suit. Hammond's face paled. Martinez folded her arms. I think they'd like to ask you some questions. The bigger conspiracy. Hammond was taken in for questioning, but the fallout was just beginning. Martinez sat across from Musk in a quiet office later that evening, still shaken. I don't understand, she admitted. Why my work? Why go through all this trouble? Musk rubbed his jaw. Because your equations aren't just about carbon capture. They can model any kind of gas dispersion, clean air, toxins, even biological agents. Her breath caught. You think? Musk nodded. Yes. Someone was interested in more than just saving the environment. The weight of the realization crushed her. She had spent years developing those equations, believing they could help the world. And now, they had almost been twisted into something unthinkable. Musk studied her. You did the right thing, Martinez. She exhaled, her hands trembling slightly. It doesn't feel like it. Musk gave a small smile. It will. For the first time, she wasn't sure, because somewhere, deep in her research, she still had a nagging feeling. There was something else, something she had missed, and she had a terrifying feeling that the real problem had just begun. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Martinez stared at the board, her marker frozen in midair. Something wasn't right. She had been reviewing her equations, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The leaks, the espionage, the attempted weaponization of her work. But now, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A pattern. Her breath caught. At first glance, it looked like a normal sequence within her calculations, just another part of the model. But the deeper she examined it, the more it unsettled her. It wasn't random. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a signature. She took a step back, heart pounding. Musk, seated nearby, noticed her sudden change in expression. What is it? She hesitated, then circled the pattern with a red marker. This. Look at this sequence. Musk stood and moved closer, his eyes scanning the symbols. Seconds passed. Then, his brow furrowed. That's strange. Martinez nodded. I've seen this before. Musk traced the pattern with his finger, deep in thought. So have I. She turned sharply. Way. He exhaled, staring at the numbers as if trying to pull a memory from the depths of his mind. In old physics papers, theoretical models on dark matter, even in some AI-generated simulations, but never quite like this. A chill ran down her spine. This equation, it shouldn't appear in my work, she whispered. Musk met her gaze. Unless it was always there. Silence stretched between them. Martinez swallowed hard. Are you saying? Musk didn't let her finish. Think about it. If a pattern repeats itself in completely unrelated fields, astrophysics, climate modeling, artificial intelligence, what does that mean? Martinez shook her head. It means, it's fundamental. Exactly. Her mind raced. If this was a naturally occurring mathematical structure, if it appeared across disciplines without human intervention, then there was only one explanation. We didn't create this, she murmured. We discovered it. Musk's voice was quieter now. Or maybe we rediscovered it. A weight settled over the room. If this sequence had existed before their research, it meant something, or someone, had used it long before they did. Martinez felt her stomach twist. If this equation existed before us, then who wrote it first? Musk exhaled, stepping back. He looked at the board one last time, then up toward the ceiling, toward the sky. We're asking the wrong question, he said finally. Martinez turned to him, confused. Musk's eyes darkened with realization. The real question is, who else already knows?